The San Marino Grand Prix. Both McLarens on the front. You have to think about what happened here last year, David, when the agreement between Prost and Senna fell apart.
Well, it certainly did. Of course, they had two starts here last year. On the first lap, Alain Prost managed to maintain his lead, but the second time round, Ayrton Senna, or rather Prost, passed Ayrton Senna, and of course that upset the apple cart for the rest of the year. There you see them coming out of Tosa, and just look at those fans. There must be thousands of Ferrari flags sold here for this race this weekend.
Official crowd estimate is over 200,000 people. I mean, you can compare the crowd to what comes to the Indianapolis 500, but the fanaticism is even greater, and it is a fanaticism for Ferrari.
It certainly is an incredible one-make crowd here. I know that NASCAR in the USA has a lot of make fascination from Chevrolet, Ford, Dodge, and so on. But here, I mean, it's predominantly a Ferrari crowd.
And it was interesting to note that as Nigel Mansell walked onto pit row a little bit earlier this morning, just walking out from the warm-up, the fans across the way, they don't care whether he's British, French, it doesn't matter. He drives for Ferrari, and he got a round of ovation.
Oh, he certainly would.
Let's take a quick look at what it looks from the in-car camera. As you can see, we're having a few problems with the breakup, but that is one of the views. That's what we'll be riding with.
That's Ivan Capelli in the Leighton House. Judd.
There's the other in-car camera. That is
Nelson Piquet.
In-car camera of Nelson Piquet. You see him weaving back and forth, getting those tires at the proper temperature.
Now we're going to have some difficulty with the temperature of these tires today, because some of the guys are using the new Goodyear B and some are using the C's. The C's are going to be a little bit marginal. That's a softer compound, and it rather depends on the temperature of the sun. John's got some more comments to that in the pit. John?
David, the last-minute decisions down here were to go mostly with a B-type compound, not the softest compound. They think they may be able to go such a fine line, you cannot believe it. The team managers are a bit nervous. The McLaren car, very last drop of fuel going into both cars. This is a very fuely circuit here. They were shaking the car back and forth, trying to get the last liter in. Williams, the Patrese car, and the Boutsen car full of dry ice. They were wondering if it was going to get hotter during the race. The radiators are full of dry ice. Martin Donnelly with a bad misfire. They hope they solve it on the grid. Back to you guys.
Well, let's hope Martin Donnelly's misfire has been cured, because he got off to a terrible start at Phoenix when the poor guy's car got jammed in between two gears right on the grid. So Martin Donnelly needs to get off to have a good race here for Lotus.
Something interesting to note is you watch the cars pull onto the grid. You know, they notice that they pause just as they make that last turn. They actually go through a sort of false start. They're getting their clutch of feel and making sure that everything is just right. It's their own sort of way of practicing the dead start they're going to have in just a moment.
That's right. You don't see very many complete practices these days, because this is such a tremendous strain on everything that nobody ever gives it a full-scale dress rehearsal.
And this is the difficult part for the cars up front. What they're doing primarily right now is keeping an eye on their rear-view mirror. What they need to see is when the cars in the back are coming up and finally getting to the grid, because they can't put their car in gear until that last possible moment, because the clutch really won't withstand it.
Exactly. They don't want to stay there too long. Now they're going to watch for the guy to run across the back with a green flag. I hope I've got that right. And then there'll be the red light, and then any time after that they'll get the green. There he goes.
And there is the start.
A great start for Gerhard Berger.
But unfortunately doesn't make a lot of progress with it. It looks like the McLarens, and there you see what looks like Terry Boutsen moving up into the third spot behind the two McLarens.
Berger made a dynamic. Ooh, crikey, you don't want to do that too much there. That's very low. Somebody's in the wall.
It looks like either one of the Tyrrells or the Brabham car. There's the Tyrrell up. It looks like Gino Lisi fighting his way into the front.
All cars crashing. That's one of the Leighton House cars.
It looks like Mauricio Gugelmin is off course there.
Ooh, a lot of scrambling there.
That's amazing. And there you see Senna in the lead, and Boutsen has just moved into the second spot, just ahead of Berger.
Well, that is a badly crumpled Tyrrell.
That's a bit of a disappointment, considering how well the team had been doing going into this particular event. No doubt that was Satoru Nakajima, because John Alesi is still way up front.
John Alesi was doing a lot of elbowing going to Tosa as well. Senna into the lead there, coming into the what they call the Variante Alta, which is the high chicane, followed by Boutsen and Berger.
And the thing we've heard so much about with Alesi is that he is not by no means afraid to muscle his way in. He is not intimidated at all, even though he is the new kid on the block.
When he
is
gets
not
another 50
intimidated.
horsepower, he's going to be tough going. And he gets that V10 Honda later on this year.
Especially when you realize that not only is he running a Ford, but he's not even running the factory Ford. He is simply running bits and pieces that they get from Ford and have built by either Brian Hart or Langford and Pack.
All over Riccardo Patrese there. Readily ran to the back of him. He is, in fact, been lightning fast through that corner as they take that left-hander into the chicane. Satoru Nakajima wandering around there, wondering what on earth happened. It looked like a lot of jostling. Here they come around that Tamburello. This is where Berger had that huge crash last year. It's extremely fast. And that white to the left there is a new concrete strip. I'm not sure of the overall safety of that.
And there you see Berger trying to retake that second spot from Terry Boutsen, making a look to the inside, but not quite having enough room to pull it all off.
Mansell is the #1 Ferrari at the moment, lying there just behind John Alesi there in the blue and white car, then Mansell, then Alan Prost.
We're going to take a look at the crash from the start in just a moment from Nelson Piquet's. This is, as you see, the Ferraris get off and spread some dirt up, and you have to wonder, how much did that cause the crash? Was it a case of not being able to see?
Well, of course, it does make life extremely difficult when you're doing 190 miles an hour and you suddenly can't see the front of the car, let alone beyond it. There we see that top chicane again. The cars have to go through all these chicanes pretty much in single file.
Interesting that Terry Boutsen is the man who has moved up. Oh, and there you see Riccardo Patrese locking up as he goes in. Patrese has had the highest total top speed on the straightaways here this weekend. As a matter of fact, during the last session, he was topping out at 195 miles an hour. Faster than Senna, faster than Berger, faster than anybody.
Well, there's no doubt about it. That Renault V10 engine has come on a lot. This is their second generation engine, and they're going extremely well.
Let's go down to John in the pits.
The Renault people are very happy with their new V10. In fact, Ron Dennis told me the only people who can really compete with us here in San Marino is the Williams team with the Renault engine. It's a very low torque engine, and up and down these hills, that's just what people want. Ron Dennis is worried about Williams in the later stages of this event.
And there you see Gerhard Berger once again trying to make that move in the same location that he tried the last time on Terry Boutsen, but Terry Boutsen not willing to let it go. Here's another view of that start. There you see the Ferrari gets off just a little bit, casting up all the dirt. As a result, we really can't see too much of what happens, except it seems that everybody tries to move to the outside. You see Nakajima's car hits the back of one car, rises up, slides off to the side, and promptly goes into the wall.
Not quite sure what happened there, but I think there's been a change here. No, John Alesi is still in that 5th spot. Right behind him is Nigel Mansell. I think Nigel Mansell overtook him then on part of that lap, but Alesi got around him again, going to the toes of hairpin. Here you see that lap 1 again. Ooh, that's what
there's a Lotus in the back. Now, that's something we hadn't seen.
Going backwards at great speed there.
Looks like Martin Donnelly. Martin Donnelly backing his way off the course. Fortunately, though, not really coming into contact with anybody. Now, here's a view from inside the car.
Of Nelson Piquet. And somebody blowing up in front of him, too, spewing a lot of oil. This is coming to the chicane before the start finish. He's down to second here. Comes through here. Got to get a good line through here. As the exit is extremely important. He's up to 3rd, 4th, 5th, and finally 6th speed. You can see that oil coming onto his camera from that car in front. Now we're into the Tamburello, the fast one where the big crash was. Long, long, long left-hander. By the time they exit this, they're doing about 190 miles an hour, up to 195 here. Through the Gilles Villeneuve right-hander. Now he's onto the brakes, down to the box, and into 3rd. Some guys use 2nd here. Accelerates through Tosa. Now it's quite a steep uphill here. It doesn't look too steep on here, but it is quite a hill. Round the top here in 6th, into the Piratella, down to 4. Make sure he gets a good apex here, out to the edge of the road here, gets a double apex, gets back to the left here. Now they're going downhill, and then hard on the brakes here for this, what they call the Aqua Minerale. Very high curves there, you don't want to get off the road there. Into 2nd, up to 4th here. Again, we're going uphill now, sweeps over to the right, back to the left, because he's now coming to the high chicane. Down to 2nd, clips the curb, exit 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, and starting to go downhill again now. Huge crowd gathering in this particular area. Under the Marlborough Bridge, they sweep right, hard on the brakes, and down to 2nd. The caution flag's being shown for something. There's some dust, somebody's spinning off there.
Apparently that is the car of Ayrton Senna. He is off the track. He is in the sand, and that is a particular problem because it is so difficult to get the cars off the sand. Even if he can restart it, and look at the crowd, they just realize that Senna is out of the car. His day has come to an end. He has controlled his track so much in recent years, and yet today, early in the race, he's had a problem, and now his day has come to an end.
His day certainly is done. He's got a flat tire there on the right. I've no doubt we'll have some replays of that. Did that go flat before or after? Here you see him coming down the hill now into the Rivarza. He's obviously got a serious problem. The tire was obviously flat when he arrived because the left rear is flat, lifting his right rear is flat, lifting his left front off the ground, and that puts Senna out of the race.
Just one little bit of debris. You know, it's interesting because, as I said, he's controlled this track. For the last 6 years, he's gotten the pole. He's had the record. When they had the testing session here just a few weeks ago, he was the fastest there. Ironically, the only time he didn't control this track was back when he was running with a Tolman. The first year, he didn't even qualify for that race.
Well, that now puts Terry Boutsen in the lead of the Imola race.
So Terry Boutsen having the lead here, followed by Gerhard Berger with a bit of a surprise. And there's more to come here from San Marino Grand Prix. And there we have the man who is leading this race, Terry Boutsen, who had a bit of a problem throughout the weekend. He's being chased by Gerhard Berger, followed by, looks like,
Riccardo Patrese, and then that's Nigel Mansell right behind Patrese. Gerhard, Thierry Boutsen has been slower than his teammate all weekend until today. Of course, today is the one that counts. Gerhard Berger was extremely quick in qualifying, but was finally pushed off the pole by his own teammate, Ayrton Senna. But Gerhard Berger is going to go very fast this weekend, but at the moment being led by the V10 engine and smoke coming out the back of Nigel Mansell's car. We saw that when he was being followed by by Nelson Piquet on our lap in Piquet's car earlier on, and
you have to wonder how long that's going
quite
to
a bit
last.
of smoke there.
Yeah,
Boy, there's going to be a lot of disappointed Italian fans here because they got all excited already because Senna's out of the race.
There you see Alain Prost. You know, this means, as we were mentioning earlier, this is not going to be a payback race. Senna really wanted to win this race as a result of what happened in Brazil, to turn it around when Prost came off and won that one. And Senna wanted to come back and do the opposite here. Unfortunately, today is not going to be his chance. Gerhard Berger, now the only person carrying those flag colors of the McLaren team. There you see the chicane that goes right in front of the straightaway, and that they really have to power down and go down through the gears just before they get onto that front straightaway.
There's Alain Prost in the second of the Ferraris, and right behind him is still Jean Alesi in the first V8, and behind him is Nelson Piquet. And as you said earlier, Nelson Piquet, of course, has got the development Ford, the very special Cosworth, which gives about another 25 horsepower than Alesi's car. And that Jean Alesi really is setting the Formula One world on its ear, and runs incredibly well in practice and all through qualifying and in the race. And Nigel Mansell doesn't look as if he's got long to go in this race, but we've seen these Ferraris leave these trails of smoke before for almost the entire race. So it's certainly too early to say that he's a definite casualty for this afternoon. But
it doesn't seem to be slowing him down at the very least.
No, at the moment he's giving Riccardo Patrese a good run for his money. Patrese, of course, desperately wanted to do well here in front of an Italian crowd.
Not only that, but it is, you know, he's had so many races now. And totaling up the total number of races that he has been in, and it's time to have a victory.
Certainly is 194 races today.
195, I believe, is this particular. So this is the time to come up and to do that.
Down to the Rivarza. The downhill braking here. That's where poor old Ayrton Senna's tyre went flat and threw him into the sand trap. Now we come along the bottom here. This right-left chicane that you see there is extremely fast. They swoop into view there. That is a fast bit of road. And as you can see on our left, not an awful lot of exit.
No, that's the entrance to the pit as well, and when they decide to go into the pits, they suddenly slow down, and they're right on the racing line when they do.
It is going to be interesting to hear what, after John said that most of the teams have chosen to use the B compound, which is the harder one, and of course, whether the Pirellis can go through the whole race. We saw John Alesi use his Pirelli at Brazil, went the whole race, but slowed up badly towards the end because he had really made their tyres go past their best. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens here.
Terry Boutsen had brake problems throughout most of the weekend, and he just seemed to get those cleared up at the very end. There's the view from inside the cars. This is considered a very fast circuit. Average speed about 130 miles an hour.
Exactly. The pole yesterday was 135. Let's listen to a change gear. he swoops up towards Piratella here. Left-hander over the top here. Fourth gear.
You notice him wiping his face mask.
Unfortunately, I think poor old Nelson Piquet, we keep seeing them change the lens on our camera. I have a horrible feeling that he might be in worse shape.
Interesting to point out those two little antennas on the front. I was talking with Gustav Brunner with the Leighton House team about the aerodynamics of those antennas. He's talking about the fact that it's one of those unfortunates of life. You go and you design a car, it's perfect in the wind tunnel, and you pop a little antenna right in the middle, and it screws up the aerodynamics just a bit. And you'll notice that some of the teams, or as a matter of fact, the car in front is now going to using an antenna that is mounted on the rear view mirror. And it's up, it's a little further out of the clean air and into the dirtier air, and then it's not quite as critical.
That car in front is Aguri Suzuki in the LaRousse Lola. And there's Nelson Piquet, who in fact is the meat in the sandwich of a LaRousse sandwich, is he not? And I think that Piquet had a big problem following Mansell and Prost, who dropped a lot of oil on him, and I think he's probably had a visibility problem because he's dropped back considerably.
At the very least, he's had to drop back just to clean that off. And, you know, if he started the race with tearaways on his visor, those are long since gone, and now he's in a situation,
Paulo Barilla spinning away and giving it the old clutch start treatment there.
Paulo Barilla almost didn't make the race today. There was an intriguing thing that happened as a result of his teammate, Pierluigi Martini, having an accident earlier in the weekend. He'd had a very fast time, would have been high up, and when his car dropped out, as a result, Paulo Barilla's car was allowed in. And suddenly this morning, they began to wonder, wait a minute, should we allow Paulo Barilla's car in? But the result was they decided to, looks like Gina Lisi had a little off-track excursion there. A lot of activity going on this weekend at the San Marino Grand Prix. There, as we see the front straightaway, with Terry Boutsen continuing to lead this race ahead of Gerhard Berger and Riccardo Patrese. Don't go away. We'll be right back with more from Imola. Question to the drivers. There you see Nigel Mansell continuing to chase Riccardo Patrese around this 3.1-mile Imola circuit.
And in front of them, of course, is Gerhard Berger in the remaining Honda McLaren. In front of him is Thierry Boutsen. And John Bisignano's got an update for us on Ayrton Senna. John?
Well, David, I think you can understand that Ayrton Senna did not want to talk to anybody after going off the track there very early here in San Marino. He said that he felt the tire going down after crossing some debris from the Nakajima accident. So it's not that the tire just went flat. He feels it had a slow puncture in it, which put him off the course a little bit further around. But it was the Nakajima debris that caused the puncture, at least in his mind. He's on his way to the helicopter.
On his way home, and there we see Jean Alesi, car number 4, the Tyrrell Ford, shortly to be the Tyrrell Honda V10, maybe even towards the end of this year. And then watch out. Here we see Nelson Piquet going past one of the Lotuses. Looks like poor old Derek Warwick.
Not giving up the place very easily, though. Has to outbrake him going into the corner.
Derek Warwick, of course, driving the V12 engine Lotus, the Lamborghini engine. Nelson Piquet, the V8 Ford. There are rumors of a multi-cylinder, or more than 8 in other words, Ford coming along. Derek Warwick, of course, at least glad to be in the race because the team that he left at the end of the year, poor old Arrows, did not make this field with either car. So a bit desperate there.
Derek Warwick had a bit of a tough weekend. He had been trying from the beginning to get right on track, and it wasn't until the very end of the second qualifying session that he was suddenly able to come up with a good time. As a matter of fact, that was the first time that he'd beaten his teammate, Martin Donnelly, all weekend.
Martin Donnelly was consistently quicker than him in every session, whether it was a practice or a qualifying, until right towards the end. And this morning, Derek was just a trace quicker than Donnelly. But Donnelly, for a rookie in Formula One, is doing extremely well, and everybody in the Lotus team and the Camel people all think extremely highly of young Martin Donnelly. Of course, he learned it all from a certain older driver when they drove together in a Porsche 962 at Nürburgring a couple of years ago. I can't remember what his name is now.
Imagine who that driver could have been.
There we see Riccardo Patrese and a still smoking Nigel Mansell. Now, it depends how much oil is left in whatever is smoking as to whether he can see this race out.
And you have to wonder if whoever, like you were talking about earlier with Nelson Piquet, if you want to avoid getting too close to Nigel Mansell at this point in the race, it's better just to hang back.
Absolutely. I think Nelson Piquet, I thought it was his vision that was his trouble, but I think he must have had another problem because he's definitely making ground fast through the field now. It could be that he tore off one of those little strips and you can see what he's doing again. because at this sort of speed, it does help to be able to see clearly what you're about.
The gap amongst those first four is staying fairly stable, the gap between Terry Boutsen and Gerhard Berger, and then going back to Patrese and Mansell. Boutsen did a lot of testing here during the period between Brazil. He had what one of the British magazines called a big moment, which I think is one of the great understatements. Coming off one of the fast straightaways, he had he spun 6 times, as a matter of fact. Lost control, spun around 6 times, managed to avoid hitting anything. But I'd consider that a big moment when you spin at about 190 miles an hour.
I'd consider a spin at anything above 15 a big moment. There you see Thierry. Now, Terry Boutsen has got a lot at stake here. He won 2 races last year in the wet, one at Montreal and, of course, the dreaded Adelaide race. But still in all, he hasn't had quite the career that people thought he would have in the Renault-engined Williams car. But now's his chance to really try and win one absolutely fair and square, and in particularly in front of an Italian crowd.
Well, and especially after what happened in Brazil. You know, he had a shot at that race. His biggest problem was he came into the pits and he misjudged it.
Well, he did misjudge it, but then, of course, he did have a bit of a reason, and that is that his brakes were going away from him there, which is why he had dropped slightly off the pace in the first place. And he literally popped up over that pit rise, and unfortunately, he had slightly misjudged it, and the pedal went down further than he wanted it to, and next thing is he's run into his own mechanic, luckily without injuring the guy at all. But it certainly put Thierry off his stride and lost him enough time, and he ended up 5th.
Well, there's that frustrating feeling of when you see the leader drop out, knowing you were following him around for some time, and then when the leader drops out and you think, if I'd only hung on just a little bit longer, perhaps that could have been my position.
Well, he's driving his heart out today.
So as we look into the pit lane, wondering when the cars are going to be coming in, we'll take a quick break with Terry Boutsen leading, Gerhard Berger in second, Riccardo Patrese right behind here in Imola. Back here in Imola, Italy for the San Marino Grand Prix. Let's take a look at the standings right now. Terry Boutsen continuing to lead this race, but just barely over Gerhard Berger. Berger not really making much of an attempt at this point, but staying close, followed by Riccardo Patrese, Nigel Mansell, and Alain Prost. Then there is Alessandro Nannini, Gino Lisi, who is continuing to stay up there. Nelson Piquet, Derek Warwick in the Lotus, Eric Bernard, who's moved up quite nice, Aguri Suzuki, and then the other Lotus, Martin Donnelly, continuing to hold in that 12th spot, even though he spun a little bit earlier in the race.
A big spin.
Coming up, our next Formula One race, there will be one more race between now and then, that is Monaco, but our next race here on ESPN will be Monday, June 11th, and that is going to be coming from Montreal. You'll see that race at midnight. And that should be a very nice race.
Now, just not to confuse the viewers here, I get always confused about this. When we talk about Midnight Monday, we really mean midnight, in my view, we mean Midnight Sunday.
Correct.
Which actually is
Eastern
the
Standard
very
Time.
first moments of Monday morning it'll be on. So wait up late Sunday night, don't wait up late Monday night.
Let's go down to John Visigliano, who's got an update on the Tyrrell that went out on the first lap.
David, is that why you always have trouble at Le Mans? You can't figure out what night and midnight's at? Come on, buddy.
Correct.
Hey, listen. Satoru Nakajima did not get out of his accident unscathed. Unfortunately, the upper left arm has been damaged. He is holding the arm against him back to the medical center. He's in the medical center now. They do not think it's broken, but heavily bruised. It could put him out. Remember, Monaco qualifying starts on Thursday. That's a very 10 short days from now. Satoru Nakajima has been injured. Besides just his car, his upper left arm, heavily bruised. Let's hope it's not more severe than that.
You know, this
John
is
Alesi there being passed by Nelson Piquet. Nelson Piquet really whistling through the field now. Not quite sure why Alesi is off the pace here. He may be driving a good race to look after his tires because he's on Pirelli, and of course Nelson Piquet.
And you can see that Gentilisi as he goes through it, and that turn specifically, we've seen him go through there several times and almost get sideways each time.
He's a very twitchy driver. He's getting the absolute best out of that car. Here we see it again on a replay as they come out of the Tamburello, pulls out of the slipstream. They use that slipstream a lot in Formula One, especially a circle like this, pulls over and past him. There you see Nelson Piquet climbing the hill out of Aquamarali, coming up to the Valle Antialta, that's the top chicane. In the old days, this circuit used to just go straight on here. They didn't have this chicane. They used to just flash straight over the top of this hill and then go down here. So as you can imagine, when they got to the bottom of the hill here, doing a fair old lick.
In fact, Terry Boutsen, talk about this not being there, is one of the woods. It's Terry Boutsen coming into the pits. Terry Boutsen coming into the pits.
That looks like
and that does not Let's go to John.
Terry Boutsen, terribly discouraged, the visor up on his car, looking at his chief mechanic saying, just push me out of here. Huge billows of smoke coming out of the back of the V10 Renault. Right now they're pushing the car a little bit forward so that he can edge it back into the garage. Terry Boutsen leading this Grand Prix, his first win in Mexico a few years ago. Certainly first leading a Grand Prix in Mexico a few years ago. Now climbing out of the car, very dejected.
Well, that is terribly, terribly disappointing for Boutsen, because the one thing that Renault engine has shown this year has been tremendous reliability. He's had a third and a fifth this year in the two previous Grand Prix, and that must be bitterly disappointing for him.
Having finally overcome the brake problems that have been plaguing them all year, and then obviously being able to run up front, and in this particular circuit he doesn't even like. He talks about the chicanes as really being a problem here.
Gerhard Berger therefore takes the lead, and he is now followed by Riccardo Patrese, who is actually making a little bit of ground on Berger. And right behind Patrese is Nigel Mansell, less than a second.
We see a little bit of a replay, and that is apparently the moment that Terry Boutsen's engine went. You see Gerhard Berger came very close to collecting the back of him right there.
Exactly the same spot that claimed Ayrton Senna just a little bit earlier on. There you see Mansell really closing in now on Riccardo Patrese. The crowd here is absolutely guaranteed to go completely crazy if Nigel Mansell passes Patrese.
And he's not that far behind, although, as you can see, it continues to smoke. He starts to make a move to the inside, but a little bit too far back.
A little bit too far back, but he is definitely catching him up. He's only 0.6 of a second behind Patrese. He was over a second, so he's making ground on him. It just depends how long it can last that smoke.
Where the smoke is coming from, how much damage it's causing during the course of the race, and whether there's enough of whatever is burning to continue it all the way through. Here's a view from inside Nelson Piquet's car. We get a feel for what it looks like from this, but we took a moment to ask some of the drivers, what is it like inside the car?
I don't know whether it's because I'm getting older or the cars are getting more difficult, but for me, the cars are getting more and more difficult. You're getting more and more cramped in the car. You've got your knees up around your neck, and I've got elbow pads on. I've got what they call footer padding all around the cockpit openings. You know, it's difficult, you know, because now the suspension very stiff. We use also the very good tires. The grip is very good, and we have some problems in the corners because the G is very high. But if you do some training, I think you can have some problems.
Now Formula One with the grip is really incredible, and we need to have medical assistance now, and we did a lot of experience with them, because to do one Grand Prix or to do a few days testing is really, really very, very difficult.
I have quite good comfort. I don't have problems. Of course, the speed is going higher and higher on the corners. The stress becomes bigger, but generally the McLaren car is a comfortable car as far as the dimensions are concerned in the cockpit, and there are not really big problems.
A comfortable car. I don't think that was the original intent of the design. Things have been changing at a very rapid pace here, so don't go away. We'll be back to Imola in just a moment. And there is the Ferrari of Nigel Mansell, who has passed Riccardo Patrese for the second spot on this circuit. And when he did it, the fans here went crazy. There you see the pass.
Going into Toza hairpin, or it's not a hairpin, but it's a very tight right-hander, locks up just a little bit on the left-hand side there, takes the lead and pulls away. And now Riccardo Patrese has got a real catch-22 question. How close is he going to follow him? Because that smoke out of Mansell's car is going to get all over his visor.
And there you see Alain Prost, who is gaining on Patrese as well.
A lot. Alain Prost was 6 seconds behind just 3 laps ago. Now he's a mere 3 seconds behind. 2 seconds, 2.3 seconds behind.
And there you see Mansell moving around to the Ocella of Olivier Brouillard. And every time I see that smoke, it looks like more and more, but it doesn't seem to affect the performance of the car. But you have to wonder what's going through Mansell's mind. I mean, he's obviously got his gauges. He knows what's going on with the engine. He just doesn't know how long it's going to last.
Well, of course, its gauges may not show that. If it's just a small crack in the casing or an oil pipe, unfortunately, his gauges won't show him anything. By the time the oil temperature gauge reaches way too high, there won't be much left in there. It'll all be a bit academic anyway.
It'll be over.
No doubt his pit is keeping. Most of these cars now have telemetry, which radios everything back to the pit that's happened to the engine and gearbox anyway. But Nigel Mansell putting on one of his sterling displays here. He certainly is a gritty driver.
And he hadn't done well, particularly throughout the weekend. It was one of those weekends where he didn't seem to be able to get it all together. When he finally went out for his qualifying attempts, each time he seemed to find somebody in front of him to balk it, and as a result, he was never satisfied with the qualifying times he came up with. He felt the car had more in it. He just wasn't able to access it.
Well, funnily enough, both he and Prost had a pretty star-crossed qualifying time, and both of them got really caught out badly 2 or 3 times. Prost ran out of fuel 1 lap and just generally had a bit of a mixed-up, as you say, a mixed-up qualifying. But this morning, they went well in warm-up, and of course now in the race, really putting some pressure on.
And there are those 3, and that's exactly what the Ferrari fans love to see. 2 of their cars in the top 4, 1 of them in second place, and even Prost easily within striking distance of that 3rd spot right now.
And of course, 3rd spot, don't forget, is Riccardo Patrese, who is another Italian, so it's not all bad for them.
There we get a nice close shot of the smoke.
It seems to come out worst of all after he goes around that left-hander, and this left-hander coming up now causes a bit of a smoke, in which case it may not be terminal.
May not be. And unfortunately, it's one of those things, frankly, we're not going to know until later on. And that is apparently Jean Alesi coming into the pits. We saw that for just a moment. There we see him wiping off his visor. It looks like this is going to be a standard pit stop. They get the tires on, and he is back out in a relatively quick period of time.
Well, that would explain why Alesi had slowed up so much. He obviously ran his first set of tires ragged. It looks in that case as if he tried to opt for a pretty soft Pirelli compound, which has caught him out. He's had to stop and change tires, and it's going to be interesting to see whether any of these 3 front runners, or the 4 front runners, with Gerhard Berger who's out of shot, whether any of them have to change tires.
And in talking with the Pirelli people before the race, they were hoping that their Pirelli runners could actually go the entire distance on this race. It's caused some problems before in trying to accomplish that.
Whoa, getting around, I'm not sure whether that's Wojtek or JJ.
Or Monteverde. It's one of the Monteverde Onyx.
Monteverde.
Let's go back down to John Bisignano in the pits.
The tires that came off as Jean Alesi's Tiro were not twisted. They looked perfectly worn. I think he may have snuck out on some very, very soft tires, and it was a planned stop. The team was ready. They were prepared. Very quick stop. We got to just find out for sure. Now he is on the very soft tires. We got to find out how much quicker that makes him. Will he be able to get back up to the leaders?
We'll find out very shortly. There you see Prost moving in on Riccardo Patrese. He is not going to be back in that 4th position for very long.
Well, he wants that World Championship, and this will help him enormously with Ayrton Senna being out of the race. Through the Aqua Minerale, 2nd gear, up to 3rd, 4th, and 5th as they exit, going up this hill. Tricky little corner, that. Prost now really putting Patrese under severe pressure.
The gap is not exactly moving, and there you see Patrese moving out just a little bit. The cars use that curbing right there, particularly on this course. Sometimes you try to avoid curbings on racetracks. There, they use that as part of this course.
Well, most of these Formula One guys, I have to confess, use the curb most of the time. It amazes me how these cars put up with the aggro. I mean, they hit the curb and they bounce over them, and they really put some suspension strain, but they always seem to survive it somehow. So, Thierry Boutsen tells me that if you don't use the curb, say at Monza, where there are 3 chicanes, if you don't use the curb, you're just flat going to lose about 3/4 of a second. Simple as that.
And yet, in talking with the Minardi folks, they feel that's what caused Pierluigi Martini's accident. He used the curb a little too much, and it actually launched him. He slid right over it into the wall.
Well,
so there's that little point of no return. You can use the curb, but you've got to be cautious as to how much you use it.
Yeah, you've definitely got to get it right. Nigel Mansell on a roll now. He's dropped. He was 4 seconds behind Gerhard Berger just 2 laps ago. Now he's 2.8 seconds behind. Crowd will be going berserk.
And they are 200,000 of them. Yesterday, at one point, we were trying to get out of the track. This was on Saturday before the race, and it was human gridlock.
I think that Gerhard Berger, that may be explained by Gerhard Berger, has just weaved his way through this traffic. In fact, he's still trying to get around that Dallara at the front. And, of course, Nigel is trapped behind the Brabham of Stefano Modena at the moment.
And there are some of those fanatical. Those fans, they pay 250,000 lira to sit in those seats. More than $200 just to see the Ferraris that they love so much. We'll be right back.
Are they just going around with their nose in the air?
And there you saw a brief look of the car on the track. It's been very popular this weekend just because everybody's happy to see something new in Formula One racing. There you see Nigel Mansell's car, followed by Riccardo Patrese. And there you see, it looks like the other Ferrari approach just went into the pits. You see as they come around. That is
Gerhard Berger, and that is Alan Prost into the pits. All 4 tires off, so maybe he had the C compound tire on. John, are you down there? He's not there. Okay, so Alan Prost on his way. Very, very
obviously
quick stop.
A scheduled stop and incredibly fast. He simply whipped in and whipped back out. That is exactly the way you want a pit stop to go.
Meanwhile, Gerhard Berger serenely goes on his way with now a 6.5-second lead. Just about to catch up with Mauricio Gugelmin in the Leighton House Judd.
And you have to think that Nigel Mansell is going to be coming into the pit soon, assuming that he went on the same basic philosophy of tires, because the gap is now stretched out. At one point it was down to about 2 seconds between Berger and Mansell, and now it is stretched out to about 6 seconds. As a result, I have to think that Mansell, during that period of time, set the fastest lap of the race, so Mansell is not slowing down.
No, I think one of the problems there was they had a lot of traffic, and they just had a big seesaw in the traffic, and Berger got held up, and Berger using all the curb there. Boy, you ought to have seen him qualifying on Friday around that corner. Very, very impressive. Obviously impressed the heck out of Senna, but he came back again.
Senna was interesting to watch during his qualifying lap.
There we see
looks like De Cesare and coming up on, there's De Cesare on the outside, and that is Mansell on the inside. Oh! Now we know why there's a 6-second gap between the two.
That De Cesare, the sooner he is castigated severely, the sooner the better it'll be for everybody, because he had Nannini into the wall at 190 miles an hour on Friday afternoon, and it was as deliberate a mistake as you could ever see. I mean, I'm sure he didn't do it on purpose, but he just flat ran him into the wall. I mean, Nannini was absolutely beside himself. And he just does that sort of thing again and again and again.
And there you saw Mansell getting the brunt of it. Mansell moving in, obviously had the line at that particular point. And as a matter of fact, it looked like De Cesare had moved over for him.
De Cesare is a lap down. I mean, what is he trying to prove? A guy like Mansell is racing for the lead. You let the man through. It's as simple as that. And if you lose a 3/4 of a second or a second on that lap, well, that's just tough luck, but you have to let him through.
You know, at one point, they dubbed him De Crashere, and you look at his list of statistics over the years that he's been racing, and he's officially only had 25 accidents on the track. But he has been involved in so many others, and as you mentioned, the incident on Friday when he got into it, the one today where he's just sort of rude, I think is a proper term.
Just totally, it's not so much inconsiderate, it just seems to have a total incapacity to be aware of what's going on around him. Anyway, this guy here, Gerhard Berger, has no such problems like that. Through the Tamburello, that's where he went off last year. I wonder what he thinks when he goes round that Tamburello. Gugelmin into the pits. We're still with Gerhard Berger. He sweeps through that very fast right-hander, Villeneuve, into the Tosa. That's where the Cesarist just nudged Mansell.
A lot of new safety standards have come in after last year. It actually just happened to coincide with Berger's crash, but there have been so many new safety standards.
De Cesarist pit. We are at Andrea De Cesarist pit. They are trying to do a routine pit stop, and David De Cesarist having a very slow pit stop here. The front brakes, David, are just smoking terribly. Andrea very heavy on those front brakes, and as you can see, the front tires were having a hard time getting those front wheels and tires on due to all that heat underneath the wheel. His brakes were absolutely almost liquid. They were so hot. This is a heavy braking circuit, right, David?
It is a very heavy braking circuit. One of those heavy braking points is just coming up now for Gerhard Berger, but the thought of a brakeless Andrea De Cesarist is sort of a good script for a horror movie, really.
It wouldn't be the high point of most drivers' career when they came upon that. Gerhard Berger continuing to drive around this 3.1-mile Imola circuit as he comes through the chicane that is leading on the front stretch. And there you see the gap back to Nigel Mansell, which was up to about 6 seconds and is now down to about 4.5 seconds. So Mansell is indeed closing in on the leader.
And he is definitely the fastest man on the track at the moment. Just done another fastest lap, 127.9. So Mansell is a man on the move.
And we're right about at the halfway point in this race. This is not one of those races where we're going to have to worry about the 2-hour time limit. As you see the little wreckage of Nakajima's car off to the side. We'll be back with more from Imola at this racetrack as Gerhard Berger continues to lead. We'll be back right after this. Remind us that Bob Barsh is not here because he is in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where time trials were rained out yesterday. As a result, they are going for the pole today. So if you tune in at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN, you will see the pole qualifier today for the Indianapolis 500. And there is Gerhard Berger as he continues his chase. Oh, excuse me, Nigel Mansell as he continues his chase of Gerhard Berger. Look at that. It is now down to less than 2 seconds gap between the two cars.
1.9 seconds separates our leaders, but this is not the leader. This is Alessandro Nannini, and we're just, in fact, coming up to the point where on Friday he hit the wall on the left, going at about this sort of speed when Andrea De Cesaris didn't see him coming and moved over into the Tosa, down to third, up to the curve. Let's see if we can listen to him shift up. V8 revving on this car to about 12,500.
There you see one of the Brabham, the only Brabham in this particular race, Stefano Modena, coming into the pits, and that does not look like it's going to be a very quick pit stop. Look like he's out of the race. Let's go down to John Bisignano in the pits for some other thoughts.
Actually, Rick, when Modena pulled in, he pulled the nose right into the garage, so I'm looking down the pit lane, but it does not look like a tire stop. He's been there for some time now, and I think he's going to stay. We have been trying to get some information out of Ferrari. It's not the easiest thing to do, so I've asked two sources. One source says that the problem is the motor. The other one says it's the gearbox. So he is losing oil. The two things lubricated by oil at that part of the car, they are the motor and the gearbox. But a little birdie told me that they fit a new oil pump to his car, and they are worried about the fitting around the oil pump. So he's definitely having oil trouble, smoke coming out of the back of the car. We've seen this before, but it's not slowing him down a bit.
We saw Gerhard Berger do this at the Spanish Grand Prix last year, and it belched a lot more smoke than that, and he still finished the race. And now look at him. He's getting very, very close to Gerhard Berger, and the crowd at the Tosa going absolutely bereft.
The passionate, the Tifosi. This is what they have been waiting for. And for them, it's been a frustrating weekend. As we said, they had not seen the Ferraris do particularly well, qualifying in the third row. And now to see this, their man running for the lead at that particular point at Acqua Minerale. Yesterday, Nigel Mansell, during one of his qualifying laps, actually went straight through. Didn't even bother to
make it straight through and did an incredibly good corner. But unfortunately for him, it was on videotape, so they disqualified the time.
It's amazing how much time you can save, but you don't have to slow down for the turn.
Wow.
The question is how much longer. The other question is, what are these two drivers going to do for tires at this point in time? We've already seen Mansell's teammate come in and make his change. What is Mansell's status with tires, and what is Berger's status?
Well, I guess that these two guys, unless they have a severe problem with tires, neither of them are going to stop until the other one does. Berger under really tough pressure now. Shots as they came to that chicane. You can see the graining very often on the TV screen, but they looked okay then, but we don't know what compounds they've got. Mansell tucking into that slipstream. Now this is the thing. Whoa, whoa, whoa!
Oh my goodness!
Nigel, I wouldn't have done that.
And he's corrected it.
I can't
believe it. Danny Sullivan in the great spin and win. If he can win this, that was one of the greatest moments in racing right there.
How much he lost? 2 seconds?
He didn't lose very much at all. Let's watch that again as they come back around.
I don't believe it.
Here, this is a little off color, but you can get the basic idea courtesy of Rye, our host broadcaster. Look at the way he spins it around, gets it back in the right direction. That was amazing.
That is the most incredible spin I think I've ever seen, including Danny Sullivan. That was...
Now, we have to assume he's going to come into the pits now to make that tire change.
Well, if you spin it that quick, he obviously didn't lock everything all up. He may not have flat spotted them that badly.
And he also did the spin mostly on the grass. So as a result, he's not, rubbing off the tires. That was spectacular. I'd love to see that again.
Let's have a look at it again. We got to look at it. We definitely got to look at it. coming through the Tamroad, using the slipstream. Gerhard Berger starts to pinch him off. Decides, he took a good bit of rubber off there on the track.
And you have to think he did not go into the pits. He's staying out on the track.
I'll tell you what, a lot of following drivers are going to come round and see those skid marks crisscross on the track, and they're going to be looking for the wreckage, and they're going to be thinking, well, what the heck happened here?
Those skid marks weren't there on the last lap.
Were they there before?
The car went so far, it went off the track. You have to wonder what is going through Nigel Mansell's mind at this particular point. I mean, that is, as I said earlier, the big moment. I mean, you spin, you come as close as you can to having a horrendous accident, and then you're back out of the track in second place, running for the lead of the race again, although he doesn't seem to be closing in quite as much as he was on Gerhard Berger.
Well, those tyres have got to be a bit rooted because of that little incident there. They can't be up to scratch again. Patrese is pulling in on him. Alan Prost, I see, is still 12 seconds behind Alessandro Nannini, who's not even on the screen at the moment, which is a bit surprising because he is the only guy of the real fast runners who's got new rubber, and you would expect him to be going quicker than these guys.
Well, in fact, he has set the fastest lap of the race. On lap 34, Alain Prost set the fastest lap of 1:27.7. So he's running the right speed. He just doesn't seem to be moving up enough at this particular point in time.
What you're saying is I should be watching the monitor more closely.
Let's go down and talk to John Bisignano about that Mansell spin.
I'm actually in the Ferrari pits. They whipped off the tire blankets really quickly. They whipped them off, and all of a sudden they have now put them back on again. The tire blankets are back on the tires. They do not anticipate that he is going to be making a tire stop at this time. Nigel Mansell, he must feel comfortable on the track right now. He is continuing around, and I'm getting thrown out of the Ferrari garage. I'll talk to you later.
It's tough being unpopular here.
And Nigel Mansell is pulling back on Gerhard Berger. He's making that ground up that he lost. He used the slipstream of Berger to a nicety on that last time. It's just that Berger sort of kind of spoiled his calculation.
Well, there was no question that Mansell was faster. Mansell was closing in. And man, there you see Gregor Wojtek obviously come to a stop someplace on the track in the Monteverdi Onyx. Wojtek having moved over from the Brabham team, where he ran the first two races of this season. And with David Brabham coming on board, he got bumped over and actually qualified quite well for this race, although now his day's
qualified extremely well and didn't hit anything all through practice and qualifying, which is somewhat unusual for him. But of course, Gregor Wojtek is one of those pretty fortunate drivers who's in the position where his father stumps up a fairly substantial bill, certainly in the millions of dollars for him to drive in Formula One, but that's the way life is.
Now think, if Mansell can come back from this, if he can come back from spinning, if he can come back from having his car smoke, if he can come back from a bad qualifying weekend, this would be one heck of a victory. Don't go away, it's getting more exciting. So Mansell, his day has come to an end after a spectacular spin, and he was continuing to close in on Gerhard Berger. He has now come into the pit area, and it looks like that smoke, whatever it may have been, finally did the damage.
Well, no doubt John will be down there asking Nigel what oh, here we see Mansell coming. This is the Rivazza, and she finally lets go. So Nigel Mansell's great drive comes to a very, very unfortunate end, and the crowd at this point will start to leave.
There's still one more Ferrari left in there. Let's go down to John Bisignano.
What you're looking at on my hand is Ferrari Agip oil. Unfortunately, the car came in. No engine noise whatsoever. The car was shut down. Oil leading right into the garage where they put security down here has been a little bit overdue and overcooked this weekend, but the Ferrari car is in the garage now. They have locked the garage. I'll try and get to Nigel. Definitely oil. It's heavy oil. Could be gearbox oil.
I'm surprised he's got that much oil left to drop on the ground after having smoked that much all through the way. Do you notice how Patrese, when that happened, was trying to move out of the racing line to stay away
from the oil? Yeah, you can see the oil spraying out the back onto the ground itself. So that puts Riccardo Patrese in second, and he's actually only just a tick of the watch over 5 seconds behind Gerhard Berger. So if he can make that Williams go like it was going in qualifying, especially him, he could still make a big race of this and salve something for the Italian crowd, because after all, Riccardo Patrese is the longest serving Grand Prix driver and of course is very Italian.
And he's a man, as we said earlier, who is overdue for a victory. During the course of his career, we're talking about 195 Grand Prix.
And well within sight of the leader, Gerhard Berger in the McLaren. Now, of course, we still don't know what these guys are going to do with tyres. Alan Prost, as I said earlier on, is catching up very, very slowly. He's whittling away at Alessandro Nannini, who's lying third behind this man, Riccardo Patrese, lying second in the Renault Williams. In their resplendent livery, they're sponsored by a number of people, including Labatt, the Canadian brewery, of course, ICI from England, and Canon, and of course Renault, who supply their engines and have got a stage 3 engine in here. No valve springs in these engines. They do it on compressed air. They return the valves on compressed air, and it makes them very reliable, and they can rev them. These cars, these V10s, rev to round about 13,000. They're a bit coy on just how many revs they do use. But it's round about 13 for the race and 13.6, 13.7 for qualifying.
Now, we can notice that Riccardo Patrese is closing in. The gap for a while was about 5 seconds. It is now down to about 4 seconds. So he is starting to reel in Gerhard Berger. He only has 2 victories during the course of his career, and this would be spectacular. On the 195th Grand Prix in front of your home crowd to be able to pull that in.
Now, Gerhard Berger has only driven this McLaren 3 times in a race. And Phoenix, of course, he had that locking up his right front there as he went into the chicane. Gerhard Berger just saw that. A lot of cars lock up brakes here because they try and run as little downforce as possible, because there's a lot of straight. They want to go fast on the straight, and it's a very heavy user of fuel. And they want to start off with as light a fuel load as possible. They shouldn't run out. They can all carry enough fuel, but they like to carry as little as possible to start with. And they tend to run a lot less downforce than they need to, or they would like to. And it makes braking very, very skittish here. And you'll see a lot of people lock up brakes. And there we see Berger's crew ready for him. Not particularly dancing around, just ready just in case, I think.
I was trying to tell whether or not the tire blankets had been removed. It looked like they were still on, but it was a little difficult to tell. Berger has had a problem basically fitting into the McLaren. He's just a little too big for it.
That's true. You heard Ayrton Senna say earlier that he was very comfortable in his car. Unfortunately, the same does not apply to his teammate Gerhard Berger, who has to be shoehorned in and out. And it got him at Brazil. He had very bad cramp in his leg and couldn't press the clutch properly, and the clutch was playing up a bit anyway. So it's one of those things that if you're not comfortable in the car, I mean, you can be in bad trouble.
And there you see the gap is now down to just over 2.5 seconds between Riccardo Patrese and Gerhard Berger. There are some new safety regulations that came into play this weekend, one of which is that the drivers must now be able to move their knees up to the steering wheel. Traditionally in the past, there were problems of getting it up that way. That's designed so the driver can get out of the car a little more quickly in the case of an accident, but it also must give them just a little more room.
Well, I think the main reason for being able to bend your knees up to the bulkhead is that if you have a frontal impact, your legs will bend when they're pushed back, as opposed to being trapped in a box-like structure, which of course fractures them all the way up. Now then, this is just what Gerhard Berger did not do. Olivier Grouillard has been having a bit of a hard time this weekend. A lot of people have been saying he's taken on the mantle of René Arnoux as the blocker extraordinaire. He didn't really block any more than he could help then, and he finally let him through.
It's difficult when you're going through that chicane to get too far out of the way because there isn't that much room.
No
but
way to go.
at the same time, Berger had a little more difficult time going around him than
and now Patrese
did. Patrese went by very quickly. And now he's pulling him in. He's been pulling him in at about a second a lap. And now we can see just how far they are behind. The one car, the lead car right there, the McLaren Honda of Gerhard Berger, Riccardo Patrese directly behind in the Williams Renault.
And what Gerhard Berger does not particularly want to see is he sees 2 more lapped cars in front of him, which is the 2 Lotuses of Warwick and Donnelly. Now, those are quick cars, even though he's lapping them, and so they're going to be extremely difficult for him to make his way past, and of course it just depends on the luck of the draw where he catches them on the circuit. There they are at the top of the hill.
Fortunately, in the case of Derek Warwick, you've got a man with a lot of experience in Formula One, probably pretty quick to realize that he's got to move over. Martin Donnelly, a very good driver, but perhaps not as much experience, and you have to hope he's caught on to the same routine.
Yeah, but also Martin Donnelly might be hoping Derek Warwick's going to let him through and take advantage of it himself, and Derek Warwick will be thinking of that, so the whole thing is all
That's always that problem when you're coming up to pass some backmarkers who are in the middle of their own race. So even though they're teammates, they're still battling for position on this racetrack.
a tremendous race. He's going to catch him up, in fact, on the straight going up to Tosa, so he might just be able to get him before he gets there.
Although
Or as
looks like Patrese might not be able to since he's far enough back.
No, we won't catch him before they get to total. He's too far back. The McLaren Honda, the Honda engine, has got a lot more power than the Lotus Lamborghini engine, but not that much. Not going to catch him up that quick.
Riccardo Patrese basically had a trouble-free weekend, as I mentioned earlier. He was the fastest man in terms of top speed at the straightaway. He was going at about 195 miles an hour, which was just a notch faster than Nigel Mansell, who'd been doing it about 194 miles an hour. Gerhard Berger, on the other hand, was a little further back. Although he doesn't have the ultimate cornering speed, apparently they were saying that they don't have the horsepower with the Williams Renault. They were simply running a little less wing, and that's how they were getting the top speed.
But of course, if you run too little wing around here, you run into trouble, like I said earlier, with braking, and of course you're just not quite as quick around the track. On the other hand, you want good top speed, straight line speed, to be able to pass people. But Nigel obviously had that, and he obviously didn't have much downforce, as you saw. Donnelly letting him through, but by golly, only just.
Sort of looked like he put up his hand saying, I didn't know you were there. Now you see Riccardo Patrese coming up behind as well. Hopefully he'll be able to smooth his way through. But this is where you have to be cautious not to get hasty. That was the problem that Senna had so much last year. He was in good positions, and yet he got a little hasty. He moved a little too quickly on those rolls when he should have just sat back just a little bit. But Gerhard Berger continuing to lead Riccardo Patrese. We'll take a break from here in Imola. Back here in Imola, Italy for the San Marino Grand Prix. They call that the Passion Hill because those are the passionate Ferrari fans. You see a Ferrari umbrella sitting here. The only way I can describe this crowd, it is similar to what comes to either the Indy 500 or a Super Bowl. There is an incredible amount of people that come. Let's go down to John Bizignano for an update on the Ferrari situation.
Well, what Ferrari has told us, this is unofficial, but it does come from the Ferrari spokesman, that Nigel Mansell and all his dueling out on the track, there was a rock that pierced the radiator. They lost all the fluid in the right radiator. Temperatures went up, and the engine let go. They said that the smoke was still okay, no problem with the smoke, that it was the coolant that left the radiators. Temperature went up, and the engine just physically seized. We will try and find out more, but right now, the unofficial word from Ferrari is a punctured radiator leading to an engine seizure.
That's so disappointing, but he still is always going to have one of the greatest spins on record, no matter what happens.
Boy, I'll tell you, yeah.
The gap between Gerhard Berger and Riccardo Patrese stretched out a little bit there while we were gone. It's back up to nearly 3 seconds, and it's hard to say whether it's because Patrese has slowed down or whether he came up upon some traffic and had a little more difficult time. He had those two Lotuses to get by. And once again, not that either car is going to be blocking him. It's simply a case of sometimes it's convenient to go by and sometimes it's not. There you see him going by the car of Paolo Barilla in the Minardi.
And Alessandro Nannini, who's in the Benetton Ford, who we haven't seen at all, is in fact only 6 seconds behind Patrese. So he is not out of this race by any means either. There's about 14 laps to go. There we see a nice camera swing there, guaranteed to bring vertigo on. Alain Prost, who will not be the darling of this crowd, had the temerity to make a pit stop, change his tyres and lose a bit of time, and not making the time up that I thought he would. He, in fact, is 7 seconds behind Nannini.
You know, that Mansell spin, once again, was something that you have to wonder what goes through your mind as you're going through the spin. We get another look at it here. As you're going through the spin, how you can recover, and you just get that moment where you suddenly realize, I can save this.
Well, personally, at the point of... at that point, yeah, you can think I can save it, but most people would have completely lost control there. But doesn't that demonstrate how quickly these cars with these big, sticky tires slow down when they do spin?
Because once he got off the grass, the spin started, but once he got back on, you saw the tires cross. He looked up, saw daylight, and took off for it.
It's one of the things that when people talk about slowing these cars down, through the cornering speeds are so high, they talk about narrower tires, but when you do spin, you do in fact lose speed so quickly with these wide and very, very soft tires.
Actually makes a slightly safer condition.
Yeah.
There you see Prost driving around the track. He is about 15 seconds or so back behind the leaders, and he is about 4 seconds behind Alessandro Nannini, who is just ahead of him in the third spot. Basically all alone on the track. He's done fairly well. He continues to have the fastest lap. He is set First he set it on the 34th lap, on the 42nd lap.
There we see the two Lotuses really having a go here, and the Nini's catching them up. This is going to make Prost's job a lot easier. The two Lotuses are definitely going to pull the Nini here. They're so busy having their own race. Slips by the first one, which we assume is still Donnelly at the back. And
takes off after Derek Warwick.
Sounded a bit cautious going through the Aqua Minerale there. It may be pretty slippery. There's a lot of oil from Nigel's car, and we don't know, but some others, because there's oil getting up onto the Nini's visor here. We can see it on the camera visor.
Let's go down to John Bizignano, who's standing by with Mr. Goodyear.
Mr. Goodyear, lead guard. We're trying to figure out, why did Alain Prost stop?
Well, our seat compound here is brand new. We didn't know how good it was or how long it would last. It turns out to be very good. Mansell started on C. Prost just figured he wasn't fast enough and wanted a faster tire.
But he hasn't really been able to keep up with the leaders. He hasn't been able to pull them in. They're on very used rubber, and he's on semi-fresh rubber.
Well, I think if you check, he's got fast lap of the race, and I think he's pulling in about a second a lap, but I don't think he can catch a front one or two. I think he's got a chance to end up third, though.
Thank you, Lee. I don't think we'll see anyone else in these closing laps. Everyone else in good shape.
Yep, everybody.
Thank you very much, Lee.
You're welcome.
He was definitely going quicker once he came in and made the pit stop. He went out and started setting the fast laps of the race. But once again, if Mansell was able to stay out of those tires, you have to wonder if Prost maybe could have done the same thing.
Well, I think from what Lee said there, he had a different set. I think he had the slower set on and decided they weren't quick enough, so he came in for the quicker tires, which in some ways works, because obviously you can't use the soft rubber right at the beginning of the race when the car is full of fuel and at its heaviest and its most tire abusive stage. But now, as it's lost fuel, and of course he's starting to really pick up speed here on the Nini, or time on the Nini, who's getting badly balked at the moment by Derek Warwick. They both got V8. Oh no, Derek Warwick of course got the V12. The Lotus shaft lip, bit of locking up there from the Nini's car as he goes into the Rivarta. Alain Prost now very, very close in on the Nini.
And once again, the camel car, the yellow car in the front, is not actually fighting for position with the two cars behind them, the Benetton and the Ferrari. Those two cars are going to be fighting for position. They are fighting for position.
Derek White wants to maintain a pace as much as he can, because he is in 7th spot. He's only got to pick up another spot, either by good luck or good judgment, and that'll put him into a points position. The Nini not giving up without a struggle. The Nini whistles by Warwick. Ross locks up, nearly nails the back of Warwick.
There you see smoke coming out the back of Warwick right now.
Oh, so Prost wants to get by him as soon as he can.
Moves to the outside, and that's sort of a difficult way to do that, but he accomplishes it. Now he sets his sight on Alessandro Nannini.
And in front of both of them is that other yellow and black car, which is Paolo Barilla.
Ooh. And that is Riccardo Patrese, who has passed Gerhard Berger for the lead. While we were away watching other things, there was action up front. On lap number 50, Riccardo Patrese
passed Gerhard Berger. Well, it's not often the number 2 gets passed for anything, especially the lead.
Did you see the amount of oil on the helmet of Riccardo Patrese?
I think Berger went in the pit. No, he didn't. He looked like he was going in.
There, you see Frank Williams watching, I believe, the Olivetti timers, getting a feel for what's going out on the track, and they have to be extremely happy at this point in time.
I should say so.
Especially after the disappointment of seeing Terry Boutsen come back in, lead the race for a short period of time. There we go back to the race we were talking about earlier. They come up on Paolo Barilla. That is the battle between Alain Prost and Alessandro Nannini, and you see Prost already beginning to look from one side to the other, looking for that weak point, lining up inside of Alessandro Nannini.
Yeah, but he knows that Nannini's going to make a pass on Barilla, so he didn't like to commit himself too much to one way or the other in case Nannini popped out to pass Barilla. Just one of those unfortunate bits of timing when they all arrive at the same place at the same time. Martin Donnelly struggling like mad to get by Derek Warwick, who's just not giving him any quarter. We know that Derek Warwick is letting out smoke and oil, so no doubt that Donnelly's even more anxious. Aqua Minerale.
Just 10 laps to go in this race here at Imola in San Marino as we watch Gerhard Berger continue to lead this, or actually Ricardo Patrese continue to lead this race right here in Imola. Once again, Bob Varsha not here in Imola because he is at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We talked about top speeds here of 195 miles an hour. Al Unser Jr. earlier this week had an average lap speed of 228 miles an hour. So you'll be able to see that live. The qualifying at Indianapolis Motor Speedway today at 5 o'clock Eastern Time. Back here in Imola for the San Marino Grand Prix, Ricardo Patrese is continuing to lead this race. It has been a long dry spell for that man since 1983 in South Africa. That was his last victory. As a matter of fact, he only has 2 victories. His first came at Monaco, which must have been a wonderful thing to do, and then having his second back in South Africa. Now in 1983, and it has been 7 long years. But now he is with a team that is considered one of the strong front runners. As a matter of fact, Pirelli desperately wants to have this team lined up for next year. They would either like to have the Ferraris or the Williams, and there were some rumors floating around that Pirelli had already lined up Williams, although apparently it's just because it's the classic I saw a Pirelli man talking to Frank Williams, and as a result, the next thing you know, the rumors had spread very quickly.
Well, there's no doubt that Pirelli would definitely want to get on one of these front-running teams. They have to get on a team with a V10 or a V12 engine. Very, very shortly, and there's no doubt that their tyres do seem to operate extremely well on the machinery they've got. John Alesi, of course, being their #1 rider. Talking
about the Williams car with Ricardo Patrese in the lead, John Visigliano is standing by with the other driver.
Terry Boutsen already changed, ready for the helicopter, but what took you out of the lead of the San Marino Grand Prix?
Well, I had a problem with the gearbox from the beginning, and the gear selection was very, very bad. I kept on missing gears, and I was selecting one gear and it was different when I was going in. I had a lot of play in the gear lever, and at one moment I went into first instead of third. The engine went immediately to 16,000 RPM and didn't resist. So.
Not too good for the engine. Listen, the first Grand Prix you led, you said you couldn't believe how easy it was. You also made it look easy to lead here. The car looked very competitive.
Well, the race was kind of easy for me, apart from this gearbox problem. I mean, the car was so good, I was about a second off the pace I could do. I was saving the brakes, and I was very, very careful for this gearbox problem. I was hoping to get to the end without making too many mistakes, but one was too much.
All right, Terry, we'll let you get back to the television. I know you want to watch the end with Frank Williams here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's got to be a great day for Frank Williams as well.
There's a guy, sorry.
I was going to say, the point is, this is not something they've fallen into. They are winning this race.
Oh, absolutely winning it. I mean, they've led it twice now with 2 different cars, so they certainly haven't fallen into it. Perhaps a bit lucky with Senna being pushed out with that bad tyre. But Thierry Boutsen really is a gent, and he's a bit of a gent amongst a slightly dodgy crowd in this Formula 1, I must admit. He's a very nice young driver, and he just needs to maybe push just a little bit harder, and it would have been so nice for him to have won today.
And I have to say, as an outsider coming in for just this one weekend to do this particular race, Terry Boutsen was extremely approachable. Sat and had quite a nice chat with him yesterday about this circuit, about his likes and dislikes. As you say, he is a very true gentleman of this sport. It needs them so desperately.
Certainly one of the more approachable, well, one of the most approachable Formula 1 drivers. Derek Warwick being in the same sort of league. And there we see Alan Prost, current world champion, only Ferrari left in the race, really making ground on Alessandro Nannini in the Benetton.
After they'd come up on all that traffic, it looked like that he was going to be setting him up for the move, but now it doesn't seem like he's gained quite as much. That gap, if anything, has stretched out just a little bit. It seems that Alessandro Nannini seems to be able to hold him off, and at this point we only have about 6 laps to go, so if he can just hold on a little bit longer, he may come up with, Alessandro Nannini may be able to come up with that 3rd spot.
Yep, he's 1.7 seconds behind, and of course, closing up and getting by are 2 entirely different sets of maneuvers.
Especially if the driver ahead of you is not interested. Let's see, somebody is
just
coming into the pits, and we've lost sight of him for just a moment. That's the Ocello of Olivier Grouillard, who managed to qualify for this particular race, but looks like his day has come to an end as we go back out on the track and watch the battle between Alessandro Nannini and Alain Prost. The gap between Ricardo Patrese and Gerhard Berger is actually beginning to stretch out just a little bit. It started out, it was just a fraction between the two, and now it's up to just a little bit over 3 seconds, almost 3.5 seconds.
Well, 5 laps to go, and Gerhard Berger is certainly losing ground. It could be that he decided to run on the P compound tyre, which is a little bit slower, or, of course, it could be that he ran on the C compound and has run them off his car, but we don't know.
Riccardo Patrese, I shouldn't call him old. He's by no means old. He's only a year older than me. He's 35 years old. Looks young, does not look like an older driver, if you want to call him that. His career started back in 1977, and that is a long time to be in Formula One. That's 13 years.
Tremendously aggressive driver when he started off. Had some moments of a lot of doubt when he was involved in the accident where poor old Ronnie Peterson lost his life. But of course, got a lot of stick from the other Formula One drivers at the time.
In fact, there was a court case over there.
There was a court case here in Italy, but I don't think in actual fact that the accident as such was anything to do with Riccardo Patrese. But he's always been a very, very quick driver, just hasn't won many races, especially when you think he's done 195.
Like I say, a man who's raced 195 races and yet only has 2 victories, and yet he's somebody you consider a front runner. Over the years, he's somebody who you've considered somebody to be up front.
He certainly had a new lease of life since he's joined the Williams team, too. There's no doubt about it. Here they are about to put Jean Alesi a lap down. Alesi obviously elected to start off on some soft Pirelli tyres, had to come in and change them, and seems to have had the fight knocked out of him somewhat. But he's still running at the moment in 6th spot, so he's still going to get 1 point.
Take every point you can get. You never know when you may need it. Last year, Riccardo Patrese came away with 4 second places and had what most people would consider a pretty good year. Now he's poised to take what would be the 43rd victory for the Williams team. You know, we talk so much about how the McLarens dominated the 80s in Formula One. You forget that it was Williams that dominated the first half of the 80s.
Yeah, they certainly did, with Alan Jones and Keke Rosberg both taking world championships, driving Williams cars with the Ford Cosworth engine, which of course we still see out there in some cars today. Nanini's car here, having the very latest V8 Ford Cosworth. What an incredible engine that's been over the years, but it looks about to be put back 1 spot in the field today by Alan Prost. Lap 57, lap 58 coming up, so there's only 3 laps to go.
But although Prost can take the 3rd spot, or may take the 3rd spot, it does not appear that it's going to be his day as they would have hoped earlier on.
No, certainly not. He certainly hasn't electrified this crowd in the way that his teammate Nigel Mansell did.
You have to say, Nigel Mansell, once, as I mentioned earlier, when he walked out onto that front straightaway before the race, when he walked through pit row, there was no question. There's signs up everywhere talking about Mansell and Ferrari. He really has their hearts here. There was a lot of rumors during the 6-week gap between Brazil and here that Mansell was making comments that he wanted to leave, that he had been talking to the Williams team. Apparently, Mansell has since said that he was misquoted, that he had said, yes, he would love to be a #1 driver, but only in a perfect world would he be able to get that situation.
Yes, a lot of people are misquoted lots of times. Alan Prost at this moment looks as if he may have just settled for 4.
Doesn't seem to be gaining with just about 3 laps left as Riccardo Patrese continues to lead this race ahead of Gerhard Berger in the McLaren. Alessandro Nannini.
So one way and another, a pretty good day for the Italians. Patrese, if he should win it, an Italian. Nannini coming 3rd, another Italian. Prost and the Ferrari. That looks like a LaRousse.
And you have to consider that even finishing 2nd for Gerhard Berger today is pretty good considering what happened to him here last year. All the emotion that is tied up in this racetrack as a result, because of the massive amount of testing they were able to do between Brazil and here. It's not like this was his first adventuring onto the track since that race, but this is the first race since then. And to be able to complete it in a relatively smooth fashion has to sort of put that problem behind you.
Unfortunately, McLaren are a team that wants to win more or less at all costs, and I'm not sure whether they will be particularly happy. I heard rumours that they weren't overjoyed with his performance at Brazil, even though there were lots of mitigating circumstances. Clutch was not working right, and there we see that LaRousse, in fact, has pulled into the side of the road.
Eric Bernard.
Now, this is where Prost should be able to do it if he's going to do it, because he has got more power than Nannini down there, and that is the longest, fastest straight. And and he's really running out of time, because next time past the line, there will only be 2 laps left.
You're going to make the move. This is the time to do it. Although, as we were talking about earlier, at what point do you start thinking about, they've said that basically they want to score points. The drivers who are competing for the championship need to score points in as many races as possible, 11 to 13 races, because some of those get thrown out, and as a result, you need to have that consistency throughout the year.
Well, he certainly needs these points. You can't start throwing away points too early in the year, because you never know when you're going to need them later on. But it looks a bit as if he's settled before.
He does, and there's a bit of smoke coming out of the back of his car now.
Last time there, I thought he'd locked up a tyre, but maybe it's something else. I mean, we don't know what's wrong. His car just may not be running quite up to par.
Yeah, it's hard to predict when you're standing a long way away and those two cars are still going at it. But he doesn't apparently seem to be making any move on Alessandro Nannini as we enter the last lap, lap number 61 of the San Marino Grand Prix here at Imola. Riccardo Patrese continuing to lead. Matter of fact, Riccardo Patrese's lead has now stretched out to just about 6 seconds, and you can hear the fans just a little bit in the background applauding as their man is going by. What a way to end a drought.
In front of the home crowd.
Not only that, but he lives nearby here. He lives up in Padua, which is just about an hour and a half or so north of here. Not only is it his home Italian crowd, but I'm sure he has a lot of friends who are here as well. It just came down for the day.
Well, I can understand the feeling. It'll be the feeling of absolute utmost elation for him. And this may unlock the floodgates of more victories to come, because there's no doubt that that Williams-Renault engine combination is right on top form at the moment. And a win sometimes just releases in a driver, unlocks certain feelings that allow him. He knows how to win again, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Patrese win another 2 or 3 races this year.
Well, unless something goes wrong in this last half lap or so, he does not appear to have any problems in coming away with a victory on this race, the third race. As he enters the final chicane, going on to the front straightaway, he's going to get the checkered flag at the San Marino Grand Prix. And that is an emotional moment for Riccardo Patrese.
And for the team.
You see the crew down there. There you see Gerhard Berger coming across. Look at the gap. It's back to Alessandro Nannini and then Alain Prost. I have a feeling if it had lasted much longer that Gerhard Berger might have lost a few locations on the stands as well.
It could be, of course, that Gerhard Berger had some sort of problem. He must have had some sort of problem, and we as yet don't know what it is, but no doubt Mr. Bizignano will be busying away down there in pit lane, asking all sorts of interrogating questions to find out just what did go wrong.
Riccardo Patrese slows down. He intends to savor every moment of this particular victory lap. Looks like Alessandro Nannini moving up to congratulate him.
A great day for these two drivers. Nannini with 1 win, the Japanese Grand Prix, and just look at that crowd, all waving their Ferrari flags. Unfortunately, to no avail today, but still a great day for Italy.
Alain Prost alongside, and we saw more smoke coming out of Alain Prost's car. Maybe that's going to be one of those little idiosyncrasies of that particular Ferrari as the season goes by.
No, they had smoke coming out in Phoenix, and they had smoke coming out 2 races last year. Look at him, giving the clenched fist salute there.
He's getting passed by everybody. He's slowing down. He's taking this lap inch by inch.
Whoa,
and there, look at the
car
smoke.
really smoking now.
You have to think that he would not have lasted much longer. You have to wonder if, in fact, he wasn't bathing that car. A great moment for Riccardo Patrese in his 195th Grand Prix. He gets his 3rd victory in front of his home crowd here in Imola, Italy. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Imola, the San Marino Grand Prix. Riccardo Patrese taking the victory here, and he really did take the victory. This is not something that was handed to him. Gerhard Berger finishing 2nd, Alessandro Nannini 3rd, followed by Alain Prost, Nelson Piquet, and Jean Alesi. That's the top 6, and now let's go down to John Visignano, standing by with the owner of the team, John Williams.
Frank Williams, excellent victory. Your cars actually dominated the race, Frank. 2 different drivers leading. You must feel absolutely thrilled about the competitiveness here.
Well, I think we're competitive. Thank you, John. It's nice to beat the red and white. It's nice for Renault to thrash Honda for a change. And I think it's going to happen again.
Monte Carlo, slow track. This is an ultra-fast track, but you're going to the slowest average track in Formula One. How about your competitiveness there?
I think we'll be competitive, but there's a guy in a yellow helmet called Senna. It's very, very hard to beat under any circumstances.
Well, Ricardo Patrese and Terry Boutsen seem pretty determined, Frank. The McLaren team manager, of course, Ron Dennis, he told me earlier that the Williams, that is the team to beat this year. He feels that you are going to pose the greatest amount of competition.
Well, I hope he's right, but he made being charitable.
Thank you very much, Frank. Congratulations.
Hey, Robin, let's go find Matt.
Remember Nelson Piquet making that comment at the beginning of the season before the year. He said, everybody's talking about the McLarens and the Ferraris. Don't discount the Williams this year. And he just proven that there's a very good reason why.
Frank Williams, a man of few words, obviously uses his brain power in getting the team right and not in idle chatter. But they are obviously going to be a threat. They've got tremendous... they are reliable. They're extremely reliable. It's very unfortunate that Thierry had that gearbox selection problem. I know exactly what it means when you go into first, when you mean to go into third. It does incline to make you...
Does a bit of damage to the engine.
Especially when you're already doing 13,000 at the change point and you stick it down a couple of gears, it is inclined to wreak uncontrollable damage to the internal of the engine.
Think about this little number. When an engine is turning 12,000 RPM, it's turning 200 times a second. That is incredible to think about the power and the speed that is being produced by that.
Still don't know how they work, actually.
Well, I believe there's a spark. I'll get into it later. Anyway, this particular race, San Marino, very good victory, although, you know, there's always that thought. When Senna isn't there, unless you beat Senna on the racetrack, and as Frank Williams just alluded to just a moment ago, there's still that little empty feeling.
Well, yes, obviously you always get that feeling, but then victories are won on, you know, races are won and lost in that way, and you tend to take the victory how you can.
And they still did beat a McLaren.
They did beat a McLaren, and Gerhard Berger is certainly no slouch. He's been going extremely well all weekend. He obviously had some little problem in the race, but the Williams cars are extremely competitive, as were the Ferraris. Alan Prost obviously had some problem too. That smoke is something they're going to have to look into, whether it's oil pumps or oil lines or just the whole oil system. They've obviously got a problem because they do it too often. It happened to Prost in Phoenix.
But unlike last year when Terry Boutsen won in the rain, everybody kept saying, oh, it was just the rain. And this year, Ricardo Patrese can say he really did take over this race, and he won it here in Imola, Italy. And there you see an extremely happy man, Ricardo Patrese, coming up to the top as he wins this particular race here at San Marino, the 10th race this year, followed by Gerhard Berger in the McLaren. Alessandro Nannini in the Benetton was in the third spot. Alain Prost followed him for quite a while, not able to get by. Nelson Piquet finishes in the points on the same lap as the leader. He was the last car who was on the same lap. Jean Alesi continues to stay up there. He finished in the sixth spot, the last points, although he was one lap down. Derek Warwick, followed by Martin Donnelly, the two teammates, the two Lotus teammates. Then it was Philippe Alliot and Nicola Larini, the two Ligier teammates. Paulo Barilla, who had a difficult time, barely made it into the field today, managed to finish the race in 11th location. J.J. Leto in the Monteverde Onyx finished the race. And Eric Bernard is listed as finishing with 5 laps down, but I believe he actually dropped out of the race just a little bit before the end.
Now, I said that Alain Prost had settled for 4th spot, but I see from our chart here that, in fact, on the last lap of the race, Alessandro Nannini certainly was not going to give up that 3rd spot. He got the fastest lap of the race on the last lap. So there you see him on the right, speaking to Ricardo Patrese, throwing his hat to the crowd, looking pretty hot and tired. It is a very hot day today here, and this is a tiring course. In fact, all these racetracks are tiring in these Formula One cars, which develop such tremendous G-loads.
And this must be an especially difficult track because of the high speed you reach. You're going from 195 miles an hour to practically hairpin turns.
Well, that's true. So you get a lot of 4.5 G-force. These cars develop 2 or 3 Gs on acceleration. They develop about 6 or 7 on braking, and in some cornering configurations they can develop as high as 6 G silo. So there's Ricardo getting those. Hey, come on, lads, drink that stuff. Don't waste it.
He's trying to fire at either side. He just shot himself.
People pay good money.
Well, and it is worth every ounce of it today.
Yeah.
He continues to wipe it off. It is worth it just to be back on the winner's podium, and as I said before, doing it in a convincing fashion. And there you see all the carabinieri out down below, all the men in the black uniforms. That's the police they have here. And all those people who are standing in the front straight, they climbed about a 12-foot barrier to get over there.
It certainly is a 12-foot barrier. It's a huge thing, and they just clambered over it like a load of monkeys after something or other, but they all determined to get over it. The police just walked by and let them do it.
That was the intriguing thing. We watched as they climbed over, and the police officer, the carabinieri, just stood there and let them go. I have to point out that this is a different circuit than Monza. Monza, they don't have nearly the crowd control. That's the race every year where at the end of the race, everybody clears out as quickly as possible. If this were Monza, that front straightaway would be packed to the gills at this particular point in time. We have to say that there's a little more crowd control in this particular occasion. As we see the view from the air of the San Marino Grand Prix, the Imola course, Riccardo Patrese getting his victory today.